"He sold it, Barbara. Your grandmother's watch. To a pawn shop." My breath hitched. The detective's words cut through the sterile air of the police station, a cold, hard truth that struck me deeper than any punch. My grandmother's gold watch, a family heirloom, gone, and he was behind it? My name is Barbara Evans, and at 30 years old, I was a nurse who thought I'd seen the worst of human suffering. But nothing in my professional life prepared me for the betrayal that shredded my own family, leaving me reeling from loss, injustice, and a shocking revelation about the man I once called brother. Life had changed irrevocably a year ago. A car accident had stolen both my parents from me, suddenly, violently. The world tilted on its axis, leaving a gaping void. It also left me and my half-brother Mark as the sole caregivers for our paternal grandmother, Helen. Mark was nearly 40, from my father's second marriage, a decade older than me. He was, to put it mildly, busy. His life was a blur of high-powered sales meetings, golf games, and chasing what he considered crucial business deals. My life, as a nurse, was about caring for others, and that ethic naturally extended to Grandma Helen. She was a sweet, frail woman, her mind still sharp as a tack, but her body failing. She needed constant care, medication schedules, meal prep, help with mobility, companionship. Mark, ever the master of persuasion, had called me shortly after the funeral. "Barbara," he'd said, his voice smooth and reassuring, "this is a lot. Grandma needs someone there, consistently. You're a nurse. You know what she needs. My job, it's just too demanding. Travel, clients, I can't be tied down." I hadn't even thought to argue. It felt like my duty. "Of course, Mark. I'll take care of Grandma." Then came the promise. "Listen," he continued, his tone softening, "I know this is a huge ask. It's a massive sacrifice for you, putting your life on hold. But Grandma loves you, and she understands. We'll make sure you're taken care of, really well. When the time comes, the inheritance, it'll reflect your dedication. You'll be compensated generously for all this. You deserve it, Barbara. You really do." He painted a picture of mutual understanding, of family loyalty. I believed him. I believed him because I wanted to. I believed him because I was grieving, and the idea of holding on to a piece of my family, protecting Grandma, felt like the only anchor I had left. So I adjusted my nursing shifts, cut back on my social life, and moved into Grandma Helen's comfortable, but now quiet, house in the suburbs of Atlanta. For a year, I was Grandma Helen's world. I managed her medications, cooked her favorite meals, read to her, listened to her stories, and held her hand through the long nights. Mark would visit sporadically, a quick half hour on a Sunday, a hurried phone call. Each time, he'd praise my dedication, reiterate his gratitude, and casually reconfirm his vague promise. "You're a saint, Barb. We'll make sure you're looked after for this." He always made sure to include "we," as if he was just as involved, just as committed to my future, even as he was clearly detached from the day-to-day reality of caregiving. Grandma Helen passed peacefully in her sleep one Tuesday morning. The grief was profound, a double blow after losing my parents. But amidst the sorrow, a new layer of anxiety began to settle in. Mark handled all the funeral arrangements, the legal paperwork, the important stuff, as he put it. I was too consumed with grief to object. A few days after the funeral, the will was read at a small meeting with Mark, me, and the family attorney. The words washed over me, a blur of legal jargon, until one phrase hit me like a physical blow. "To my grandson, Mark Evans, I bequeath the entirety of my estate, including the family home located at—" I stopped listening. The entirety? Everything? My heart pounded. The house? The savings? Everything? And I was mentioned as a dear granddaughter, Barbara Evans, bequeathed a small antique silver locket that I already owned. It was a token, a meaningless gesture, compared to the years I'd given up, the promises Mark had made. What? I finally managed to croak, the word catching in my throat. Mark, what about what you said? What about the inheritance, the compensation? Mark sighed, a performance of weariness. Barbara, really, now? Grandma must have changed her mind. Look, you did a great job, truly, but you were just doing your duty as a granddaughter. And I'm the firstborn grandson, the direct heir to Dad's side. You know how Grandma felt about that. It's not my fault if she decided to leave everything to me. His tone was dismissive, almost condescending. He wasn't even bothering to hide the smirk that played on his lips. The air left my lungs. He was lying. He was just lying to my face, dismissing my entire year of sacrifice, my grief, everything. I felt the familiar burn of tears, but this time it was laced with a furious, simmering anger. I stared at him, my brother, the man who had promised me security, who was now calmly stealing my future. Then a sudden, sharp thought cut through my despair. The jewelry. Grandma Helen's precious collection, kept in the safe. She treasured that jewelry, especially the large gold family watch, a piece that had been passed down for generations. It was a tangible piece of our family history. Surely that wouldn't be part of the general estate for Mark. I excused myself from the room abruptly, needing to confirm what my gut was screaming. I rushed to the safe in Grandma Helen's study, my hands fumbling with the combination she had taught me. The heavy door swung open. My heart dropped. It was empty, completely empty. The velvet-lined drawers, usually filled with shimmering pearls, sparkling earrings, and that distinctive gold watch, lay bare. A cold dread seeped into my bones, replacing the anger with a sickening certainty. Mark, it had to be him. My fingers shaking, I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. He answered with a casual, "Yeah, Barb?" "The safe," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "It's empty. Where's Grandma's jewelry?" A beat of silence, then his dismissive sigh. "Oh, those. Barbara, don't be so dramatic. They're just trinkets, not worth much anyway. Grandma probably gave them away, or maybe they just got misplaced during her final days. You know how things were getting." "Misplaced?" I practically yelled. "They were in the safe, Mark. She kept them locked up. This isn't misplaced. This is gone. Did you take them?" He chuckled, a short, sharp sound. "Now, why would I do that? Look, Barbara, I'm busy. Maybe they were stolen, you know? There's been a lot of robberies in the neighborhood lately. Did you check the house thoroughly? Are you sure you locked up everything?" He was blaming me for his theft, just as he had blamed Grandma's change of mind for his inheritance fraud. My heart pounded with a furious, sickening certainty. This wasn't just a broken promise. This was calculated deceit. My friend Ashley, a pragmatic and fiercely loyal paralegal, listened patiently when I called her, sobbing later that day. "Barbara, this is absolutely insane," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't just about a broken promise anymore. This is theft. You need to go to the police." I hesitated. Police? Against my own brother? But Ashley's conviction and the gnawing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong finally spurred me into action. The next morning, I walked into the police station, my heart heavy but resolute. The police station buzzed with a low hum of activity, a stark contrast to the quiet grief I'd been living in. Detective Miller was a man with a tired but kind face, his eyes sharp with experience. He listened patiently as I recounted the will reading, Mark's dismissive lies, and the chilling discovery of the empty safe. My voice wavered when I spoke of Grandma Helen's gold watch, a precious heirloom. "And you say this watch had a tracker?" Detective Miller asked, leaning forward, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. Yes, I confirmed, my voice gaining a little strength. Just a few months ago, there were some burglaries in our neighborhood, mostly targeting valuables. My dad, before the accident, he thought it would be a good idea for Grandma Helen's most cherished piece. He put a tiny GPS tracker on it, disguised as a charm. He even showed it to me. I explained how the tracker connected to a simple app on Grandma's old, rarely used tablet, just for emergency purposes. It was his way of trying to protect her, even then. Detective Miller nodded, his pen scratching across his notepad. That's a strong lead, Miss Evans, a very strong lead. He picked up his phone, his tone shifting from patient listener to focused professional. I'll need you to come with me to Grandma Helen's house now. Show me exactly where the safe was and if you can access that tablet. The air in Grandma Helen's study was still and heavy with absence. I found the tablet exactly where she kept it, tucked away in a drawer. My fingers fumbled as I opened the simple app. A small red dot glowed on the screen, indicating the watch's last known location. It wasn't far from the house, but it definitely wasn't in the house. The address displayed belonged to a pawn shop about 20 minutes away. Detective Miller's jaw tightened. A pawn shop? Well, that complicates Mark's misplaced story, doesn't it? We drove there immediately. The pawn shop was exactly what you'd expect. Dusty display cases, shelves crammed with forgotten treasures. Detective Miller showed his badge, explaining the situation to the bewildered owner. Within minutes, the owner produced the gold watch from a locked display case. Its familiar gleam, so beloved by Grandma, felt alien here. "And who sold this to you?" the detective asked, his voice low and steady. The owner pulled out a ledger. "Mark Evans, sold it last week, had all the proper ID, signed the forms." He slid a dated receipt across the counter. Mark's signature, bold and unmistakable, stared up at me. My vision blurred. It wasn't just a missing heirloom anymore. It was cold, hard proof. Proof that Mark hadn't just deceived me about the will. He had actively stolen from our grandmother, from me, the person who had given her everything. The anger flared hot, eclipsing the lingering grief for a moment. The police acted swiftly. Within hours, Mark was brought in for questioning. I wasn't present for the interrogation, but I later learned he initially tried to bluster his way out of it, claiming Grandma Helen had given him the watch or that he was simply holding on to it for safekeeping. But the GPS tracker, the pawn shop receipt, and his own signature were undeniable. His story unraveled under the detective's relentless questioning. The call came late that evening. "Miss Evans," Detective Miller said, his voice flat, "your brother, Mark Evans, has confessed to selling your grandmother's watch and other pieces of jewelry from her safe. He's been charged with grand theft. He's being held pending arraignment." A strange mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, raw and potent, that my truth was finally being seen, that his lies were unraveling. But beneath it, a profound sadness. This was my brother, the boy I'd grown up with, albeit from a different mother, the man who had promised to protect me, who now stood accused of stealing from our own grandmother. It was a victory, but a hollow one, tainted by the ugliness of betrayal. "Thank you, Detective," I managed to say, my voice raspy. "Miss Evans," he continued, a pause on the line, "during the interview, your brother, Mark Evans, he also made a few interesting remarks about the will. Something about how he secured the inheritance. It struck me as odd, given your initial complaint was mainly about the jewelry. Would you be willing to come back in tomorrow? I have a few more questions about that will." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about the jewelry. This was about everything. He had stolen from her while she was alive, and he had stolen her final wishes after her death. The game, I realized, was far from over. The next morning, stepping back into the police station felt less like a chore and more like walking into the eye of a gathering storm. Detective Miller's gaze was sharper now, his questions digging deeper than just the stolen watch. "Ms. Evans," he began, leaning forward, "Mark made some very specific comments about the will. He hinted he'd secured it. It sounded like he had a hand in it. Do you remember any unusual circumstances around the time that will was changed?" A cold tremor went through me. Unusual circumstances? I racked my brain, thinking back to the chaotic, grief-stricken months after my parents died, the blur of caring for Grandma Helen. Then a memory surfaced, sharp and unsettling. Yes, there was. About 3 weeks before Grandma passed, I was in the hospital for 2 days, undergoing medical tests for a reoccurring health issue. It was nothing serious, but it was the longest I'd been away from her since I moved in. Mark was supposed to be checking on her then. Detective Miller's eyes lit up. A 2-day window, the primary caregiver absent? That's it. His voice was low, thoughtful. That's exactly the kind of opportunity someone trying to manipulate an elder's will would seize. He pulled out a pad, scribbling furiously. "We need to find the notary who handled that specific will amendment." The investigation shifted. It wasn't about a stolen watch anymore. It was about the insidious rot of betrayal. The detectives' team moved fast, tracing the notary Mark had used. It wasn't the family's long-standing lawyer, but a small, obscure firm across town, one Mark had clearly picked for its discretion, or perhaps its vulnerability. They brought the notary in. I wasn't there to witness his confession, but Detective Miller later described the scene. The man, a nervous, sweating professional named Mr. Jenkins, initially tried to deny everything. But under the weight of the detective's calm, persistent questioning, the truth started to leak out, then gush. He threatened me," Mr. Jenkins stammered, his voice raw with fear. "He said he'd ruin my business, expose me to the Bar Association. He told me he had a family understanding with Mrs. Evans, that she just needed gentle guidance to finalize the changes. He pressured me, kept rushing me." Mr. Jenkins had seen Grandma Helen's frailty, her moments of confusion. He'd known it felt wrong, but Mark's intimidation, his promises, had swayed him. He signed off on a will that wasn't truly Grandma Helen's wishes. Hearing this, a wave of nausea washed over me, quickly replaced by a fierce, righteous anger. Mark hadn't just taken her jewelry, he had stolen her final voice, twisted her last act of legacy. He had exploited her vulnerability, manipulated a professional, all while I was lying in a hospital bed, ill and trusting him. It was a cold, calculated act of profound disrespect. The evidence was undeniable: the notary's terrified confession, the confirmed dates of my hospital stay, and medical records that subtly hinted at Grandma Helen's fluctuating lucidity. The legal process moved with a speed that felt surreal. The courtroom was a blur of formal robes and hushed whispers, but the air crackled with raw tension. Mark, stripped of his usual charm, looked pale and desperate. He tried to spin a tale of false accusations, of my vindictive nature, but his words rang hollow. When the notary, Mr. Jenkins, took the stand, his shaky, tearful testimony painted a devastating picture of Mark's coercion. Then the detailed police reports, the pawnshop receipts, the GPS data, each piece of evidence a nail in Mark's coffin. The judge's voice, when it came, was clear and unwavering, cutting through the courtroom's heavy silence. "Mark Evans, the court finds you guilty. Guilty of theft for the brazen act of stealing your grandmother's heirlooms, and guilty of fraud for the despicable act of manipulating her final will through undue influence. Your actions show a callous disregard for family trust and the sanctity of a dying woman's wishes." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Mark's face crumpled, the carefully constructed mask of innocence shattering. He was led away, his shoulders slumped, leaving behind a silence heavier than any accusation. Later that week, my friend Ashley came over, her eyes reflecting the turmoil of the past few days. "Barbara," she said gently, "I'm so sorry it came to this, but you did the right thing. You brought the truth to light." I looked out the window at the quiet Atlanta street. The victory felt complex. "I didn't want him to go to prison, Ashley," I said, my voice heavy but steady. "He's still my brother in some way, but he didn't leave me a choice. He committed crimes, theft, fraud. His actions, his own greed, his own lies put him there, not my anger." I turned to her, a weary but undeniable sense of peace settling over me. This wasn't revenge. This was just justice. In the days and weeks that followed, a strange quiet descended over my life. The incessant worry about Grandma Helen, the gnawing anxiety over Mark's lies, the relentless fight for the truth, it was all gone, replaced by a stillness I hadn't known in years. My friend Ashley was a steady presence, a true anchor. She didn't offer empty platitudes, just shared silences and the occasional knowing glance that said, "You did what you had to do." The family, however, was a different story. The news of Mark's conviction, especially for fraud involving Grandma Helen's will, ripped through our scattered relatives like a shockwave. Emails, phone calls, hushed whispers. Most were horrified, shocked by the audacity of Mark's actions and the depth of his deceit. The golden child illusion had shattered, exposing something ugly beneath. Some of the older aunts and uncles, who had always praised Mark, now stammered apologies to me, their voices filled with belated regret. They saw it clearly now. The years of silent sacrifice, the years of my quiet contributions that had always been overlooked in favor of Mark's manufactured brilliance. I accepted their apologies with a weary nod, but I didn't dwell on them. It wasn't about demanding their validation anymore. That validation had come from the court, from the detective, from the undeniable truth, and from within myself. Slowly, I started to rebuild. I returned to my nursing shifts, feeling a renewed sense of purpose in my work, caring for people who genuinely needed me. Grandma Helen's house, once a place of comfort turned battleground, now felt like a sanctuary again. It wasn't filled with wealth, but with memories, untainted by Mark's greed. The gold watch, recovered from the pawn shop, now sat on my dresser, not as a symbol of betrayal, but of truth unveiled. I sometimes wondered about Mark, about his life behind bars, but the thought was fleeting. He had chosen his path, one paved with lies and stolen trust. My conscience was clear. I hadn't sought his downfall. I had simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is a burning desire to inflict pain. This was about justice. It was about a quiet, determined resolve to unveil the truth, to reclaim what was mine, and to ensure that wrongdoing, especially against the vulnerable, does not go unpunished. It was about proving that even the quietest, most underestimated person, when pushed to their limit, can find the strength to expose the darkness and stand in their own light. And in that light, I finally found a quiet, profound peace. My grandmother's watch ticked softly on my dresser, a steady rhythm reminding me that time always reveals the truth, and that some battles, though painful, are absolutely worth fighting.